All right, everyone. Welcome to, what is this, our fourth? Is this our fourth live from the Lincoln desk? Yeah, episode 4. My favorite number 4. So we got to make this one a good one. Appreciate you all being with us. I'm starting to see, kids are going back to school. People are starting to respond to text messages again, come to meetings again. So I think we're starting to get back to the swing of real life. I know I saw someone post this earlier this week where they said now's the period where we try to pack in the final weeks of summer and or multiple months of summer in just like a week or two span. I butchered it, whatever. Which is kind of true. But people are starting to get re-engaged, which is really exciting because we got an election coming up. Early voting starts, vote by mail starts basically like right now. We're right up to it. So it's important that we have these kind of conversations, and I'm glad you're with us to do it. We got all sorts of comments on social media, emails, and notes sent into the campaign on this topic. So we're going to have a really good discussion on data centers. And we've been talking about it all week, and we're going to keep talking about it. So I'm really excited for that. And it's funny, if you saw the video that I posted on Monday, I'm looking at my ugly face right now, and my hair got super poofy. My person who cuts my hair, she's awesome, but she's been stuck with back to school stuff. So I am way overdue for a haircut. So I actually gave myself a trim. I trimmed the sides on my own. I did awful, but because the camera is so far away, you can't even tell. So there you go. There's an insight into campaign life, giving yourself a haircut at 2 a.m. before you catch a few hours of sleep before your next campaign stop. But I'm excited that you're here with us. For those of you who are watching live, feel free to jump in the chat and share your thoughts on data centers, either just your initial thoughts on how you feel about it, or as we go through this, if there's something you agree with, something you disagree with, or if you want to add more context, certainly feel free to do so. It's really cool. Throughout the week, we've already had people who someone will share a thought and someone else will give some additional information. And that's what we want. I firmly believe, and this is one of the foundational tenets of this independent thing that we're building. I firmly believe that if you get 5 regular people around the table on any topic, we can arrive at a consensus. I know it seems overly simplistic, but I've tested this over the years. We've done, obviously, lots and lots of polling and focus groups and talking to voters and being out there in the field. And it seems to me that on even the most controversial of issues, take abortion, guns, data centers, and even on the most controversial issues, you put people around the table and they're often, if not all the time, able to arrive at a pretty common sense path forward. It's only when you introduce partisan politics and the need to keep special interests or party bosses or your base happy that everything gets overly complicated. I've tested this on so many controversial issues. Even when we're out getting petition signatures, if there's a group of friends, I'd try to stop them for a minute and just be like, hey, what do you think about X? And just have a quick conversation about, again, hot button issues. And every time it was like, they'd all have different ideas, but within a minute, we could have like, yeah, but we agree on X, Y, and Z. Okay, cool. That was easy. And that's what I believe about data centers. That's what we're going to do today. That's what we're doing this week. We've got several other things planned throughout the week to have this conversation with people who support data centers, people who oppose data centers, and every people who are all the way in between. I have shared my opinion a lot, and I'm going to do so a lot here on this live. I'm also going to do it on the podcast, and certainly I've got some other things going out this week that will share my thoughts. But a lot of this early in the week has been first asking you to share your thoughts, and then of course I'll chime in with mine as well. But I'd like this to be a discussion. Let's get into it. Let's do it. Let me lay the groundwork. Well, again, I offer to you all the chance, jump in that chat to share your thoughts if you have it. And I've got my social media up, and then I've got a document from my campaign team with everything you guys have sent in. So we'll go through all of it. And here's where we're at on data centers in Illinois. In 2019, the legislature passed a bill that did a number of things, but one of the things that we're focused on the most right now is tax incentives for data centers. And in this discussion, I always want to be honest and transparent. That bill was a bipartisan bill. Here's how I'm proving how honest and transparent I am. Darren Bailey was in the legislature at the time, and he voted no on that bill. It's not uncommon to see a bill that has an N next to Darren Bailey's name in the roll call, because he pretty much voted against every bill. It's partially why he never passed a bill. So not uncommon to see him as a no vote, but I will give him credit. He did vote no way back in 2019. Now, since 2019, obviously J.B. Pritzker has been governor, and he has been pushing data centers ever since. He has given nearly $1 billion. It could be over $1 billion now because it doesn't count some of the latest in tax incentives to data centers. There was a recent article that put that number at, oddly enough, 666 million. I'm shocked I didn't see more people pick up on that and do something with it on socials. But a latest article said that the number was actually more like 670 million plus a few that are coming up. So I don't know what the actual number is. It has bounced around a little bit. It could be as low as around 700 million or as much as about $1 billion. But a lot of money has been given in tax incentives to data centers, and we've opened up a lot of data centers. We are right now the number 4 state in the country for data centers. We were 3 for a while. There was a time, ever so briefly, where we were actually number 2. So we have been leading in the country on data centers, and J.B. Pritzker's been at the forefront of that. And we've been slowly losing our ground, if you're somebody who wants a lot of data centers, because of many of the challenges we've talked about in Illinois related to economic development in this state. And so even though Pritzker and his team have been pushing, we've been starting to lose ground in this area. One of the biggest reasons for that is BIPA, which we're going to talk about today. And I think a few of you brought that up, so we'll talk about it in our discussion point. So you've seen that momentum sort of slow when it comes to data centers in Illinois. Polling has precipitously dropped on this issue as people have become more and more nervous about AI, as people have been starting to oppose them at the local level and more so oppose where they're going, but some are opposing them altogether. And the polling has really turned around. And so you've seen a whole lot of politicians change their tune on data centers. J.B. Pritzker is one of those. He very quickly went from being all in on data centers, which back in 2019 and early on in his tenure, he had to because he didn't have a whole lot of other things from economic development that he could tout. So I understand why he went all in on data centers, but now he's been trying to turn that around and say that he wants to put in place guardrails, which of course I agree with, and he was unable to get anything done down in the legislature. Interesting thing is, of course, as always, JB blamed the legislature because that's what JB does. It's always somebody else's fault. When even his own allies were talking about how JB was nowhere to be found down in Springfield in this last session and certainly wasn't leading on this or many other issues to get this done. So he blames the legislature, but he could have actually spent some political capital, gone down to the Capitol and pushed something forward and made it happen, but he didn't. So here we are, session's over. We're now waiting for a veto, which won't happen again for another few months. And JB, to his credit, suspended tax incentives and said, not until we have guardrails in place will we put those tax incentives back in. I give him credit for suspending the tax incentives. Again, trying to be fair here. So that's where we stand today. You have a number of groups who've put out what they'd like to see. And I'll give credit where credit is due. The environmental groups have put forward a bill called the Power Act. And let me get the sponsors for that. I know in the House that's Robin Gable, and I'm blanking on in the Senate. Give me a second. I've got notes and I should have had it up. So just give me 1 second. Again, trying to be fair and give credit where it's due. So yeah, Robin Gable in the House. Oh, Ram Villavlem, who seems to have every major bill in the Senate. They're the sponsors for the Power Act. And it's not as comprehensive, I think, as what needs to be done. They had some certain areas they wanted to focus on. Of course, environmental, that's their focus. And there's some good things in their bill. There's a few things I disagree with, which we'll talk about today. But I give them credit for putting something forward. Just recently, late last week, the organized labor put forward their own plan. It's led by Local 150, Mark Poulos. I hope I said your name right. You get the camera going and suddenly you start saying people's names wrong and then you feel bad about it. But Mark has been leading that Local 150. There's a number of labor organizations who are part of that. They've put forward what's more of a legislative framework, and it's really pragmatic, and there's a lot in there, to be honest, that I really like. I think they did a really, really good job. I'm actually kind of annoyed because a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about and what we've been putting in our plans that we're going to be releasing aligns very well with what they did. And we've been planning on doing Data Center Week now for a while. So we've been waiting to talk about, our plans on this. And now that 150's put out theirs, a lot of this is going to be like, oh, hey, that's already in their plan. And theirs came out last week. So you're just copying theirs, which I guess you could say is true because they beat me. They were out to market before I was. So kudos to them. There's a lot of really good stuff in their framework that I agree with. And we'll talk about that this week as well. So now the goal is to come to some consensus. And the good news is when you look at some of the things that we're going to propose, some of the things that J.B. Pritzker has proposed, when you look at the Power Act and the organized labor framework, there is a lot of agreement. What you're going to see on our podcast later this week when we have a proponent and an opponent to data centers, you'll see there are points that each of the sides wants that isn't really meeting in the middle. So again, when you try to come up with a consensus, you're going to find that you're not going to make everybody happy. And I think you're going to see that on our podcast where proponents, there are certain things in there they prefer not be in there. And then opponents want even more than what's in there. So we seem to be sort of hovering over what might be the final target, which is really good news. My beef with all of this is a lot of this was already out there. I mean, when we pulled together our framework, we talked to opponents, we talked to supporters, we pulled our framework together. To be honest, it didn't take very long. So this could have been done in May. This could have been done before the end of session. I don't know why it needed to be pushed all the way to November, other than veto is after Election Day. And a lot of politicians would like to push the controversial stuff to after Election Day in case maybe it will impact their election. So my guess is an agreement could have been reached in the last session, but it didn't because it's way more convenient to push this until after Election Day. Just my guess. But either way, it does seem like there's a consensus forming here. There's a few discussion points, which I'll bring up today, where there isn't agreement, where there isn't a consensus. So there's, of course, still work to be done. But I do think on a lot of these major points, a lot of us are pretty well aligned. So that's good news. So that's where we are today. Last thing, before I get into some of your feedback, is... and sorry, looking at the comments. Nobody can see you. You're good in your PJs. I like it. Well done. Whenever I do these videos, sometimes I'll do, the COVID mullet. The mullet was business in the front, party in the back. During COVID, it was business up top, party down low. But I am fully dressed right now. I've learned as a candidate, you can't get away with shorts and a button down and a dress coat on top. So, but Ann, I'm with you. I love it. Sorry, got waylaid. So before we get into this, last thing I want to do is share where each of the candidates are in the governor's race. Again, trying my best to be objective and be fair. So on J.B. Pritzker's side, I laid down the groundwork a bit already. He's been a proponent. He's been pushing it hard. As poll numbers have shifted, suddenly he's changed his tune. I can tell you this is certainly going to be a liability for him in November because of how much he's done on data centers up until now. But to give him credit, he has come to reasonable. He does want to put guardrails in place. He has specifically brought up certain things that are important to him, making sure that we're not burdening Illinoisans with increased utility rates because of data centers. He has brought up the need to make sure we're protecting our environment and protecting our natural resources. Get out of Bailey and his campaign. And even a lot of the people, it's pretty well known. I helped Hoffman Estates, didn't help Hoffman Estates. I helped the people in Hoffman Estates who were fighting against a proposed data center in Hoffman Estates and joined some protests. And even a lot of people at those protests weren't anti-data center permanently. It was don't put it here. Do it the right way. Don't put it in the wrong spot. Don't put it right next to people's houses. But yes, we do understand there is a need here. So most people, even who would be in the opponent side, aren't where Darren Bailey is, which is just ban them. So it is a bit of an extreme approach. I don't want to get off topic here, so I'll just leave it at that tends to be what you get out of the Bailey campaign. It's whatever you can say in one sentence. It's not sound policy, but it's designed to get as many social media likes as possible. So I guess kudos on that. He does have a extremely successful and effective social media presence built up by doing things like this. So I do have to give credit where it's due. When it comes to building a policy for Illinois on something as important as data centers, you need people who can think through a policy, who can talk to people and hear other sides and develop a consensus. It's never really been Darren Bailey's strong suit. So I can't imagine this is really going to be up his wheelhouse. Seems like J.B. Pritzker is here now. He wants to have this discussion. Maybe he'll actually spend a little political capital come veto to actually get something done. Wouldn't that be nice? From my perspective, I've always been where I stand now. And since we're talking through your ideas, let me give you my ideas, which are that we need to do this the right way. I understand we are moving into this high-tech world, this AI-driven world, and so things like data centers, which, by the way, aren't exclusively used for AI, they're used for so much of the things that we rely on. Data centers are going to be a necessary part of that future. But to me, it's how you do it, and that's really how everything comes down to. It's how you do it. That's why I was so strongly against the data center in Hoffman Estates. We'll talk about it today. There were so many things done there that were wrong. It was not the way to do that. But then this weekend, I was in Elk Grove Village. They've put up 20 data centers, 5 more are in construction, and a total of 19 are being planned, and there may even be more than that. But Elk Grove Village is a mostly industrial community, and they have a massive industrial park, the largest in the North America, and people who live there, they know that that's part of the reason why they're there, because they'll make the trade-off having such a large industrial area, knowing the benefits they get. If you're an Elk Grove Village resident, you've gotten $400 rebates via your Visa or a Visa card. You've gotten rebates on your utilities. People make that decision. They make that trade, and that's what you want. You want people to be able to decide for their local community what makes sense for them. And you might live in a community where you say, we don't want data centers at all, and I don't care that it might mean a little bit higher taxes, or it might mean, or we don't see some of the benefits you might get from it. Awesome. That's your choice in your community. And then other communities might say, build it and save me money on my taxes. This is why we need to have a framework from the state and then let the local communities decide. And that's what I've been advocating for. If you go on my website, we launched a platform on our website. Well, it was issues compared to the other 2 candidates. It's a platform. Darren Bailey still has his 4 short AI written sentences and his AI written blueprint. Doesn't really have a platform even still. And J.B. Pritzker and his website is even worse. It just talks about his past accomplishments. Literally nothing about what he's going to do for the next 4 years as governor. I kid you not. The dude has not told us what he's going to do in the future. Even back to his State of the State, he didn't even tell us what he was going to do over the next year as governor. It's just what he's gotten done over the last 8 years. So the issue pages on our website was, compared to them, a platform, but it isn't actually a full platform. We're coming out with that soon. We're putting in a ton of work on that. So, but even then, when I launched, I had a whole paragraph about where I stood on data centers. So there's people who've been trying to jump on my social media and say, hey, where's your stance? Like, dude, come on. I've put out my stance since day one. I've talked about it on social media, in posts, in videos. I've been pretty clear on this, but people like to try to make it seem like you're not. I'm the one candidate in this race actually talking about issues. And so I've been clear on this, that we need to put these guardrails in place. We've needed to do it for years. I even said this in my podcast years ago when I wasn't even a candidate for office, that we've needed to put these guardrails in place for a very, very long time. I'm glad we're finally maybe starting to do it, but we are way, way too late. And I have always been a massive supporter of local control. What I want is these conversations to be had transparently. I want to this chat. JFR, truth about what AI data centers require to operate: water, fuel, consumables, etc. Okay, let me talk about that. First, what it's important to note is that data centers, let me just check with my producer. Everything's good, right? We're all good? Iffy, but it's okay. Internet's not great. Hopefully you guys are watching and we're okay. All right. Jump in the chat if there's a problem. Hopefully we're okay. But if there's an issue, jump in the chat, please, and we'll try to make sure it's resolved. Data centers are used for a whole lot of things. They are, if you really want to oversimplify it, they are storage and processing. We have been rapidly moving towards a world where processing and storage is centralized. It's not on your devices. This has been the path we've been on for a long time. And that's what data centers support. Now, the people who utilize those companies or whatever who utilize the data centers, they can use those for anything. So those people who are saying, I'm against this because I'm against a surveillance state, I respect that position, but understand it isn't data centers who are doing that. They're simply, again, the storage and processing for all the different companies who utilize data centers. So stopping data centers doesn't really stop the surveillance state, but we're going to talk about that because a few of you did make comments. So those hyperscale data centers, the big ones, those are the ones that drive AI. I'd imagine that some of the non-hyperscale data centers have some impact on AI, but really it's the hyperscale ones. Those are the AI data centers. So understand what data centers are and that there are different types of data centers. Second, their consumption, their usage. So what JFR is talking about here, and I don't know if you support or oppose, I'd love to hear your thoughts, JFR, if you support or oppose. But what data centers use is a heck of a lot of energy. That is their primary fuel, if you will. And everyone agrees that data centers are the primary driver for the increase in energy usage. The increase in our energy costs is two things. It is, yes, the increased demand. It is also the decreased supply, because at the same time as we've been bringing AI and data centers and everything else that gobble up a lot of energy, we've also, especially in states like Illinois, been dramatically reducing our energy production and our energy development, especially that baseload generation. And so what drives your higher costs when you get your energy bill, your electric bill, is, yes, data centers increasing demand, and also some of the decisions that lawmakers have made in Illinois going back to 2017 to decrease our supply in pursuit of green energy and clean energy. So that's what's driving your increased costs. And yes, data centers are a significant part of that equation. They also use water to cool. Now, modern data centers are using air and some other things that help cool those data centers a lot more efficiently. But early data centers consumed a gigantic amount of water. The good news is there have been improvements in cooling systems. There's closed loop systems. There's more modern systems that do it a whole lot more effectively. They are still using a good amount of water, so it is still something we need to be talking about. And as somebody, my wife and I are big on water. We've always said we're going to always live near major bodies of water and a significant amount of fresh water, because I believe, sure, this is my crazy thing. We all have our thing where I say, ooh, that's a little bit crazy. I think our most fought over resource is not going to be gas. It's not going to be oil in the very near future. It's going to be water. That's my opinion. So in Illinois, when we have so much fresh water, that is a precious, precious resource. So whether it is the data centers of old that used way too much water, or the data centers of today that use a good amount of water, you have to be objective and say they use up water. And some of those old data centers have not yet been retrofitted to the more modern systems. So that's something we should be talking about. So JFR, I hope I answered your question about what they use, what they don't. And I see down here, you support data centers, you support AI data centers. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Comment on what Elon Musk said, that opposition to AI data centers is short-sighted because they're the fuel that drive the U.S. to be predominant in AI. So that is a position that many believe. That part of the reason why I don't do national politics a lot, so forgive me if I don't word this fully accurately, but one of the reasons why Trump and some of the national players are really pushing data centers is they believe this is the wave of the future, and they believe it's almost it's a national security issue, that if China or Russia or one of our enemies gets there first on AI, that's a national security problem for America. I just want to be honest. It's also what we said when we develop the bomb. It's this idea that we've got to get there to that thing that could destroy us all first before someone else. I do understand that, but it also makes me kind of concerned. There's a lot of good that can come with AI, but there's also a heck of a lot of bad, and we do need to be honest about that. And the federal government has not done their part to put regulations in place, to put guardrails in place. They're only now finally talking about a kill switch with AI because of how many times AI has broken out, and AI wasn't even connected to the internet, and it found a way to connect itself to the internet and do things it wasn't supposed to do. Suddenly, finally, Washington, D.C. is like, oh, maybe we should do something about this. So in a world where if your strategy is we have to get there first to keep everybody safe, then you actually have to keep everybody safe. So that's the only thing I'll say. I don't do a lot of national politics, but if your position is we got to get there because this is the way of the future, then our lawmakers have got to be on board with that and catch up to that at the national level. And they are dropping the ball bigly. That said, JFR, thank you for your thoughts. And again, I have said, this is the direction we're going, so we got to figure out a way to do it and do it right. Let me make sure I got through anybody else's comments in the chat, and then I want to go through some of the other stuff that's been provided. All right, got some thoughts in here. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I don't see a lot on data centers or AI, so I'm just going to keep going. Okay, let me go over to some of our other stuff. You guys keep going in the chat, but we got a ton of people jump in previously who gave their thoughts, and I want to go to that. So let me go to Liam. So Liam's comment was, leave it up to the community where they want to put them. I agree with that a lot, Liam. Now, I will say, just to be clear, and I think you meant this too, but just to be clear, the state does have to put guardrails in place overall for there to be a fair marketplace on this, if you will. For instance, I brought up the situation in Hoffman Estates. So they were going to put the data center right on the border of Hoffman Estates. Well, that's on the border then of another town. And the way that the rules are written in Illinois when it comes to zoning, you don't have any say in zoning in your neighbor's community. That's not how it works. And by the way, that's how it should be. So I get it. But there isn't a framework here for how data centers should be negotiated, how should they be classified. And when you build a data center, it has an impact beyond just the community you build it in. And this is one of the challenges when it comes to energy, because if you're in Northern Illinois, you're in the PJM energy zone, and if you're in Southern Illinois, you're in MISO, and in both of those territories extend well beyond the borders of Illinois. You want to have some fun, you should Google it, because PJM actually is Northern Illinois, and then it skips over, and then it's a lot over in the east, and then Southern Illinois and MISO actually goes more north. It's kind of odd how it's all developed. But anyways, I digress. So if a data center is built in Virginia or Indiana or any of these other states that share a territory with Illinois, you are still going to, in a way, pay the price for that. Because I don't want to get too lost in the weeds on energy here. We'll talk about that in the future. But a lot of what's driving your energy costs up is peak rates or peak usage. Why is that important? Because when energy providers have to plan for the future, they've got to plan for what your biggest need might be that day in the summer when everybody's running their air conditioning because it's 95 or 100 degrees out. They've got to plan for that. They can't plan for what you need on average and then just, oh, wait, people need more. Let's just put a bunch of power on the grid real quick. It's not how it works. So if a data center opens up in another state, or another zone or part of our territory, that still drives up that marketplace, those costs. When it comes to PJM or MISO having to plan for the future, that all gets built into those auction rates and everything else. So there's an impact on your neighboring communities when it comes to water usage and environmental concerns. There's an impact on a whole region of the country when it comes to energy. And so that's why you have to have guardrails at the state level and also at the federal level, but good luck getting Congress to do anything. But that's why you need guardrails at the state level, in addition to making sure that local communities have a major say in whether or not a data center comes to their community. Hope that helps, Liam. I want to jump over to our chat in a different screen, just make sure nobody else and I will get back to you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I just want to make sure I get to everybody. All right, Michael. So Michael is against. Let me see here. It's longer, so I want to just summarize real quick, but you can go on. This one was on my socials here. His concerns are privacy, who benefits, who's building these. The race to me is on to ensure that the U.S. government can use our data to spy and manipulate us so China doesn't. And I think I talked about that earlier. I do think that that's a valid concern. I think privacy is the biggest thing here, so I'll just summarize with privacy. And Michael, I agree with privacy. So as I put in a very long post a couple weeks ago, and as I talked about last week when talking about FLOC and ALPRs, privacy is fundamental. Privacy is a human right, and we are failing at that, at the national level, and for what we can do at the state level. Lawmakers are absolutely failing us in that regard. And doing one thing, let's say not building data centers. The concern is that doesn't solve the underlying problem. Banning flock cameras doesn't solve the problem of us living in a surveillance state. Banning data centers doesn't solve the problem because many of those problems already exist, and they existed even before AI. And so while AI does amplify those challenges, I definitely will grant you that. And it means we should be moving much, much, much faster than not moving at all. We should be moving much faster to solve that challenge and make sure we're protecting people's privacy. Unfortunately, not building any more data centers doesn't really impact that. It does create a squeeze, so it does have a small impact. But to be honest, then those data centers will simply get built somewhere else, maybe not even in the US. I don't know. So I don't know that that solves your underlying concern, though I do very much agree with your underlying concern. I've been concerned about this for a while, and especially now as a candidate, the world we live in right now, AI is, again, can do a lot of good things, but it also can do a lot of scary things. And right now you could generate a video of me within seconds and post it to social media that says, I love data centers and I want to build data centers on every street corner. It'll look just like me. It'll sound just like me. And since I just gave you that audio, it'd be really easy to do. We are in this world right now where we don't have the right framework in place. Not only make sure that people aren't surveilling us and capturing our information and storing it and selling it, we also don't live in a world where we have the right protections to make sure people own their own likeness and their own voice. And like, these are things that there's been a few things done on, but we do not have nearly enough protections in place for that. So if your concern is privacy, then we should be talking privacy. And that's a big issue and one I would love to talk more about because it's not talked about enough. All right, let me keep moving here. Pop over to the chat. Frederick. There's plenty of space in Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, where the local residents are happy to have the local property tax and other revenues. They just lack the water. And that's interesting. You know, part of the reason why data centers have been coming to Illinois is access to water. It's also access to energy, though that's starting to dwindle a little bit. But it has been access to water. And, you know, interestingly enough, you point out how there are places who have plenty of space. I almost wonder, I'm getting over my skis here, but I almost wonder if there's a way to marry those two things. The land is somewhere else. They don't have the water. I truly believe we're going to live in a world where we no longer talk about oil pipelines running throughout our country. We're going to be talking about water pipelines running through our country. So maybe that's something people will be talking about. But I don't know how much Illinois is really going to be super interested in exporting our water when we need to protect it for ourselves. So I'm not saying that's something I'm for, just saying if we don't want to put them here, is there some sort of an agreement that can be made? It's certainly worth talking about because there are places in this country who do have plenty of land and wouldn't mind plopping those in. By the way, areas that have a lot of sunlight, so you also help mitigate the energy usage because the solar panels that you could put in with those data centers would be a heck of a lot more impactful and useful year round. So, Frederick, interesting point. I like it. Let me go to the next one here. Raj pointed out they have a panel coming up. Let me pull that up. Here, free plug. Here we go. AIM organization down in Will County has a panel coming up in Plainfield on Monday, August 24th at 6 p.m. Is there a website on here? AIM for Will, AIM for number 4, WILL.org. So if you want to talk more about this and go to something in person, go to their event. There you go, a free plug. I've known Raj for a long time. Happy to give him that plug. I don't know who's on that panel, who's involved. I got to check my calendar. Maybe I'll pop by, but there you go. There's a free plug. We should be talking about data centers, and I'm happy to support anybody who's willing to do that. Brian, why can't we just do what China is starting to do? Dump them in a capsule in the ocean so no water needs to be used to cool since they're already surrounded. I like people who think creatively. I love the idea. You know, I was in Hawaii, and I know they do for a lot of their stuff. There's actually a place on the Big Island where they have a pipe going down deep down in the water, sucking up colder water, and there's all sorts of businesses. It's right by the airport there. There's all sorts of businesses around because the water that's getting pumped in is super cold, and that is a awesome resource for them. They've got a lot of tech businesses that have started to locate there. It's also where they do the Hawaiian salts and other things because you get super clean water from down there and really good salt. There you go, plugging businesses left and right. So this is something that has been done before, either pumping that water up or utilizing that water. I do like that creative thinking. I also, just when it comes to energy, we've started to talk more about hydro. I had a conversation with somebody last week who the hydro technology is what they can do now is incredible. We don't have a lot of hydro in Illinois because we don't have those. This isn't my field, so reservoirs is probably not the right word, but just bear with me. We don't have the same deep reservoirs when it comes to like that hot water, the steam, whatever else you could do. We have plenty of water where you could cool buildings and you could cool even streets and neighborhoods, but not enough to do like a hydro plant. But this technology has gotten to the point now where you can drill deep enough where you could do this in Illinois. And so maybe there's a solution both from energy usage to do more modern hydro plants, but also even for cooling. When it comes to cooling these data centers, could you pump up not just water, but super cool water? And would that have an impact? It's certainly something worth talking about. Meanwhile, Brian's idea of dumping them in the bottom of the ocean doesn't do us any good in Illinois. And I don't think we're going to be putting these in the bottom of Lake Michigan. We have enough trouble keeping Asian carp out of Lake Michigan. I'm not sure we want to dump anything else into Lake Michigan. But I do like the creative thinking. Maybe, was it Elon who said, we'll put them in space, put them on the moon? Maybe that's the wave of the future here. But I do like the creative thinking because we don't do that enough in Illinois where we are thinking into the future. We tend to say, oh, something just happened. Let's react to that when we could have predicted that thing was going to happen. So let's actually look ahead. And Frederick, clearly a capitalist, you could charge for the water. Gotta love my capitalist friends. Well done. All right, let's go to next one here. Sandy, let me expand this. Technology has its positives, but in my opinion, it's also the bane of our existence. I am not in favor of building more data centers. I support the notion of moderation, or everything in moderation. So first, the notion, yeah, I'm with you. I'm the guy running as the moderation candidate, the centrist candidate, the mainstream candidate. So certainly everything in moderation, I agree with. And we have built a good number of data centers already. Illinois is, as I said, I think at the moment we're fourth. So I certainly understand a feeling of, hey, let's slow down on this. I respect that. Technology, I think sometimes we can conflate two problems. Let me just talk about technology because my wife and I very much agree that technology is the bane of our existence. I am very against AI slop. I am very against AI being used to do things that humans can do just as well. Now, do I like AI to support humans? Do I like AI making us more productive? Of course, that is an excellent use of AI. Do I like AI being able to help us get medical breakthroughs to save human lives? Heck yes, I'm all in on that. But the AI slop you see on social media that you especially see from the Republican candidate in this race, you've seen some candidates do this a lot. You see a lot of people put my face on my cat. Okay, I get that it's fun, but we've got to be responsible with the resources we have on this planet, and we have reached a point now where we can impact that in our daily lives way more than we ever used to be able to do it. Yeah, I'm that guy who goes to a restaurant and when they don't recycle, I'll oftentimes bring it home, the garbage home, so I can recycle it at home. I very much believe we need to protect our planet, but I'll also admit, me recycling a handful of plastic things that I could have just thrown in the trash at the restaurant, that isn't making a huge impact on the environment. But I want to do my part to pass on this amazing gift we've been given to my kids and my grandkids, God willing. And so I want to do my part on that. And so does that make a huge difference? Not so much. Does turning off, Abby, she's wanted to make fun of me for this for years. So here you go. Let me share something. I used to unplug our nightlight during the day in our bathroom because it's dark in the bathroom, but we don't need the nightlight during the day. So I'd unplug it. I mean, how much did that actually save? And it wasn't for the money. It was, to not waste energy. That was so dumb. I stopped doing it because it wasn't worth it, but I did that for years. So listen, I'm the first to say, let's protect our environment. But many of the things that we could do over the years didn't have that much impact. But now in this AI world, you can grind down. I mean, you could spend energy, electricity, burn water, burn our environment to do things that aren't really necessary. And so while I respect your right to do so, the market hasn't priced in the environmental impact yet. So you doing those things, it's fun. Yay, woo, this was cool. I just produced a video and look, now I'm dancing like Michael Jackson in my video because I nailed my talking points in an interview, hint, hint. And I mean, my response is, you know what? People would prefer you to just dance. And if it's awful, you'll get more likes. So heck, you get more likes on your post and you didn't just have to waste our resources to do it. So I do get what Sandy's saying. I'm big on not burning our resources for no reason. I don't know that that's data centers. That's a human thing. Like we need to have a conversation about protecting our environment and being wise stewards of the resources that we have and that we've been given. That's a much deeper conversation. It's not a conversation we tend to have. And so to Sandy's point, I would love it if we'd have those types of conversations, but I'm not sure that's data center driven. It's human driven, and we should be carrying on that conversation. Amanda, ban all this crap. Okay. Fair position. I asked just why Amanda felt that way. I didn't get a response. Maybe she'll share later, but I'll respect her position on that. Christina posted, explain what there are. They're clearly significant. Why do we need them? Why do you use so much water? She goes into explaining, like, please explain this. Talked about it. People need more specific information. So we are trying to do that, Christina. And actually in our podcast, we're going to have some experts. So we're going to talk about it and give data more than what I'm able to do. I'm decently knowledgeable, but I'm not an expert in this space. So we are definitely doing that, and we'll continue to do that, and this is part of how we'll do that. Dennis, is this a popularity contest? The best comment was everything in moderation, but this should be based on principles, constitutionality, freedom, and yes, even progress. Small p, not progressive. That doesn't gain the most votes, which I agree with. And, you know, I think Dennis's point is an interesting one because, you know, when you talk about a popularity contest, I mentioned earlier, one of Pritzker's biggest vulnerabilities is data centers, and a smart campaign's going to go after him for what he's done on data centers for 6-7 years. Yes, he's seen the light today, but that doesn't wipe out what he did for the first 6 to 7 years of being governor. And that's why his Republican opponent has gone hard against this, because if they're smart, they're going to go hard on J.B. Pritzker in the final months of this campaign on data centers. I think that's what Dennis is referring to here. That's politics, not governing. And as somebody who spent 20 years in politics, as somebody who is a political strategist with deep knowledge of politics, I very much understand that. And we've got a campaign to run right now. So I respect that. But you also have to show that you have an ability to govern. And that's lost in this debate of just ban him and he's the worst, they're the worst, which is why we're trying to show a different path. Yeah, I am going to talk about and have and will how J.B. Pritzker hasn't done this right and deserves to be held accountable for that. But I'm also going to share what's an actual responsible path forward, because it's not enough just to say the other guy sucks. You've got to actually present an alternative that is a better plan and a better path. So, Dennis, thank you for your comment, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And jumping back to the chat so I can try to be fair here. Will every data center only be opened after a vote or referendum in the community? There was another comment similar to this, so I'll try to find it as we talk about or will elected officials get to choose. So the idea of local control is it's still a decision made by local leaders. We're in a democratic republic, not a democracy. So I have seen people who want this to be, and this was one of the comments, I'll find it. Someone who wants this to be a referendum each time. I'm pretty well known as the referendum guy. I love referendums. I love people having a voice in major things in their community. I'm not going to find that comment in time, and we're running low on time, so I won't do it. But there are people who are a proponent of that, and I'm open to the conversation, but you have elected local leaders for a reason. Your mayor, your trustees, They've selected people to serve on a zoning commission. If you're at the county level, you've elected your county commissioners. These are people you've elected to lead you. What I want is to have a structure in place where they're required to be transparent about this, where you know about it. There's a required notice. There aren't NDAs standing in the way where things are being hidden, so that you as the local resident are aware of it and can voice your opinion before those elected leaders make the ultimate decision. I believe that's the right balance, because we do respect our local community leaders, and they are aware of information that you may not be, of zoning in the whole community, of opportunities in the whole community. It's important that they're ultimately able to make that decision with the knowledge that they have. All right, jumping back to our list, we've got a couple people here who, just want to troll, so I'm going to skip right past that. Gary has a really good point here. Data center is basically a massive computer. I think I made that point a little earlier. The question is, do you allow them and do you incentivize them? So I followed up with Gary and asked, would you allow them and would you incentivize them? And he said, yes, but only in rural areas where electricity and water demands would have less impact on local communities. So I think that's a valid point. I like that position. And it's happening in some places. Yorkville isn't fully rural, but it's much more rural than maybe where we are here. And they're building several data centers out there. The challenge in the more rural areas is data centers are being built where there's three things. They want water infrastructure, they want networking infrastructure, and they want power infrastructure. Reason why Yorkville is a location, or even DeKalb, is they've got ComEd substations and things that are right there, so you can plug right in. One of the reasons why Elk Grove Village is so favorable for data centers is not only the fact that they're already industrially zoned, but also the fiber optic network that they have there is significant and frankly makes me quite jealous. So there's infrastructure they're looking for. The more rural you get, the less likely you are to find that infrastructure. So it's kind of what Frederick's point was earlier, that when you find areas that have more land, you don't maybe have some of the other things that these data centers need. There's also this. This is brought up in other times in the comments. You also get to the point where a lot of that is zoned for farmland. And something that I know a lot of us, or I'd imagine a lot of us would agree on, is the importance of our farmland and protecting our farmland. And so giving up or taking over or dezoning or rezoning farmland for data centers is for many of us a big no-no. So that's another thing where you get more rural, you run into that problem, which is a significant problem. So want to point that out when talking about Gary's point here. Popping back over to the chat, making sure I'm not missing any of you who are with me right now. And how about the bribes and who runs the data centers? So this is why I'll talk about it here. This is why we want a structure. This is where actually the environmentalists, the labor groups, where I agree, and even our pro data center person, you're going to hear him on the podcast where he also agrees, because he's been bemoaning the fact that in Illinois, the way this has been done with a lot of these data centers has been way... I wouldn't even say not transparent. I mean, these things are being snuck through and hidden. So you've got shell companies that are putting in for zoning and for developments, or buying and building up the development, so trying to hide it that way. You also have NDAs that are being signed where the mayor, the administrators, the zoning, they're not allowed to talk about it. So it puts them in a really, really, really bad spot, because the community might find out about it, and then legally, the leaders of the community can't talk about it. And so it puts everybody in a really, really bad spot. And so we're talking about, how do you respect the fact that in business negotiations, NDAs are important and necessary. But once that deal's been cut, then the community needs to have a say on, will they allow for that development to occur in that community, in that location. So there's a balance you've got to find here, where you can still allow the negotiation to occur on the land. And what they'll do is they'll enter in a purchase agreement, but it's contingent on X. And that contingency is, will the community even support this? So there's a way to do it where you can separate those two out, make sure that privacy is respected during the initial negotiation, but also make sure that it's not being hidden from the community, so that the community can have a say. And that's how you find that balance on that topic. All right, going to the next one, a couple more trolls, so we'll skip past that. Andrew, if they pay their own way, then fine. If they expect for expenses to be passed down, then absolutely not. I think everybody agrees with this, which is why we're talking about making sure that those expenses are not passed. And someone else comments on this, so I'll come back to it in a minute. Sue, no to data centers, especially in residential areas. So I then asked in response, are you no period or no in a specific location? Because as I said earlier, I've talked to a lot of people who say no on data centers. And then when you talk to them, it actually turns out it's just no in the wrong spots. No in residential areas, which seems to me to be common sense. No in specific commercial areas, or maybe even all commercial areas. Makes a lot of sense. Again, I go back to the data center that was going to be in Hoffman Estates. It was right next to a residential area and right across the street from one of the busiest commercial areas in the entire region. So yeah, that's not going to follow both of those things that we just said no to. But if you've got industrial areas, if you've got open areas that aren't currently zoned, to me, those are prime locations for this. So Sue, in her response, absolutely not in residential areas. The hum, the environmental impact, that's fair. The potential health risks, not a lot has been studied about this. I think we see this a lot with technology. We saw it with cell phones and wireless, and there is a little bit of an early sort of freak out that we all have because we don't know how that technology is going to impact us, and we don't. We had somebody who say, can we just wait till in the future? Which I get that. Let's wait till we actually know the impact of these things. The problem is for those long-term studies, you're talking about 20, 30, 40 years, and the whole world will be different in 20, 30, 40 years. So this is the balance we have to strike, is do as much research as we can to make sure we know that people are safe, but you can't stop until the long-term studies are done, because by that point, the whole world has moved on. So that's the balance you've got to strike on that when it comes to, like, does this impact lung issues or asthma, which that more comes with the environmental impact of energy usage. All right, hopefully I got through your stuff, Sue, well enough. I know I butchered it a little bit, so forgive me. Cole says keep them off farmland. That's 100% fair. And I very much agree with this. 75% of our land here in Illinois is farmland. And, you know, we are the world's largest producers in a number of crops, second largest in a few. I mean, we have significant output in this state, and agriculture is a significant driver of our economy, not to mention just an important part of our future. And so when you think about long term, we're going to have to feed ourselves and feed the world. And so protecting that farmland is paramount. So Cole, good point, and I strongly, strongly agree with you. All right, popping back and forth to make sure I don't miss anybody. All right. Somebody who, well, that's kind of a troll comment attacking Darren, and I'm not going to do that right here. We're just going to talk data center. So let's keep going. Okay, this person posted a lot of them. Let me keep moving. All right, Robert. Given the online services that people want and the continued digitization of many sectors of the economy, data centers are going to be needed. At the same time, I don't think the government should be subsidizing them, or pretty much any private sector firms. It's a fair point. And as it can create issues such as overinvestment, which is one of the things that I think a lot of people are concerned about, which is, you know, how many of these do we need, and do we create a bubble? It's amazing how many people I talk to who just assume that we're going to create a bubble, which is kind of what we do, right? We rush into something, we overdo it, and then we correct. So I don't know enough about this industry to make this claim, other than what I know about us as humans. I don't see any world that we don't create some sort of a bubble, because that's just what we do. So Robert's point here is pretty well taken. And having an idea of how many of these do we actually need, and making sure we're planning it correctly. One of the things I'm going to push for is when we require these data centers to bring their own energy, which is a part of this. I want to see short-term and long-term investments into energy, meaning I don't just want it to be a situation where they can put up some temporary whatever it might be, whether it's clean or green energy with wind or solar, but it's just on that site and they control it. I want to see long-term investments in nuclear, things that will have a significant, or maybe even hydro, that will have a significant long-term impact on that baseload generation, so that even if this is a bubble, even if all these data centers we're building in 10, 20 years start to empty out and are no longer needed to be utilized, those investments we made into the long-term energy needs of our country and our state, those remain. And that's what we need to do, is not just look at solving the current emergency that's right in front of our face, but we need to use this as an opportunity to solve the larger problems, which is why part of my plan has investments into property tax relief for Illinoisans. That if you want to bring a data center, fine, but one of the things we're going to require of you is an investment into a fund or a program or whatever it might be. There's flexibility on how lawmakers want to structure this that will directly lower people's property taxes. Let's get to actually helping working families, in addition to making sure you're not hurting them, because that's what so much of the conversation's been about. Don't hurt people when you're building this, but maybe let's actually help people too. Seems like something we could do. All right, Robert, I didn't get to all of your things, but we're running low on time. I know we had a conversation on some things, so let me make sure I don't miss anything. I think I got to most of your stuff. Thank you for commenting. Donnie, this is a property rights issue. And the question is whether developments impose costs or interfere with the property rights of its neighbors. And that's what I think people are missing is I believe in personal freedom and your right to do what you want to do on your property. I have a lot of mayors I've worked with and local leaders I've worked with, which I've annoyed them because I believe if you want to build a shed on your property, they should let you do it. And I'm going to get some texts on that, but it does frustrate me a bit how little you're allowed to do on your own property and your own land. So send your texts. I know, I get it. But people forget that what we do has an impact on other people's property. And when it comes to data centers, that has an impact on the surrounding community, which is why you have to structure this so that the residents around there, the businesses around there, and the even surrounding communities themselves could have a say. There's a bill. Hold on, let me bring it up. Darby Hills put this one through, Senate Bill 1050. Which would give surrounding communities a say within a certain mile radius when a data center is proposed. I think that's common sense. I really like that bill. Couple troll comments. Let me keep going. All right, Lewis commented, I probably fall in the middle. Our government is handing out tax breaks and we pay for those, which is 100% true. We're paying the energy bills, the water bills. I am summarizing because it's a long comment. We are not keeping up with energy needs. Illinois has gone from being a strong electricity exporter to now we're going to be an importer. Again, summarizing. And Pritzker is not a big fan of local control on many things, and I want to have local control. We've talked about a lot of this already, so because we're low on time. Lewis has a couple more comments. Water bills are soaring. I agree. Yeah, it's got some really good points here, but we have covered a lot of this, so I just want to keep us moving for time. Again, a couple troll comments. Let's keep going. I say no to centers. Penelope, she posted a few screenshots on why. It's from a website that says say no to data centers. Fair. Maryland, I'm in between. Health issues, pollution, noise has to be investigated. But AI is here and can't be ignored. So this is all complicated in the age of computers, but we've got to figure out what's a necessity. I think that's a very good point, Marilyn. Let me jump over the chat, make sure I'm not missing any of you over there. Brookdale Broker, you brought up, Senate Bill 1050. Thanks for putting that in the chat. Good work. All right. Nicole, maybe we should just slow down. The long-term impacts aren't known. I did kind of talk about this a little bit ago, Nicole. It's a good point, and we need to know the long-term impacts, but long-term studies take a long time. It's in the name, so that's kind of the challenge there. All right, keep going. Couple troll comments. Daniel, issue for me is scale and impact, and the generational footprint. Okay, really long comment. I want to get to the points here. Let me just scan it. Give me a second. How communities are approaching this when you get local leaders making the decisions when only 20% of people come out and vote in municipal races. That is a very fair point. which is why we've got to make sure that we have requirements for how they're going to engage the community and make the community aware when something like this comes up. Talk about the underhanded approach. We did cover that. This was the person who said they'd like to see referendums, which I talked about before. It is a fair point. And I think this individual, let me get the name again. Daniel, their point is community engagement. We need to have more civic engagement on this. That I really strongly agree with. All right, we've got Rick in between. They use water and electricity, but that's not a big problem in many areas. But local regulations should lead here, local control. Fair. Running low on time, so I'm just going to finish these last few here. Terry is a no on data centers. Once they get the foot in the door, they expect all sorts of tax cuts. This is why, I get this, and this is why what I want to have is what's called, let me get to the right spot here, binding community benefit agreements. So that the decisions that are made, these are negotiated in public, the decisions are made in public, and it's legal. So that the benefits the community is supposed to receive, they actually receive those. And if they don't, then those data centers lose all tax benefits that they got as part of that deal. So to solve this challenge that you're talking about, Terry, that's one of the best ways to do it. All right. Fenris, maybe your name, or maybe it's just a social media name, but nobody needs AI slop. Agree with you strongly. All right, keep going. Amanda, like other manufacturing facilities, they don't belong in residential areas. That's a really solid point. Everything should be in the open, with the community a part of the process, not in the dark. Again, really solid point. Environmentalist studies should be done, and they should bring their own power so citizens aren't left footing the bill. Also, a really, really good point. So we've talked about a lot of that, Amanda. Only thing in there I didn't get into a lot, and I'll be fast here because we're over our hour, is energy, where there is a bit of disagreement between, let's say, the proponents of the Power Act, the unions in their framework, and even where I stand is what power can you bring? And even when it comes to PJM just put something out where they basically want to put it on the states and make each of the states put the rules in place, which the states should have been doing. Illinois should have done, but whatever. But they call it bring your own. I'm going to get it wrong. It's not bring your own generation. For them, it's something else. It's bring your own peak, whatever. So they're even less than what we'd want to see, which for them, it's just bring enough to cover us at those peak moments. I think we need to go further than that. The environmentalists want it to be just green energy. So only wind, solar, and battery is what they've put forward. I believe nuclear is also green energy, but they have said absolutely not to nuclear. I think you're leaving out a significant part of our clean energy future, so I disagree with that. Where the unions have come in and said they want to add natural gas and they want to add nuclear to that arrangement of you bringing your own generation. I agree with that. I think, to me, the way to find the right balance is to have a short-term, long-term requirement that you need to cover this percentage of short-term energy generation, which can be wind, solar, battery, and yes, natural gas. And then you also have to invest in long-term, which is then nuclear, hydro, or whatever else you want to put in that long-term bucket. So this way we're getting both not raising your energy rates as a local business or resident, but also investing in the long-term solution to our energy problems. So that's how I believe you can find that balance. Oh, and I missed one, SMRs. This is also another one that the Power Act doesn't include. I don't remember if it's in the union framework, but I think it is. But those small modular reactors, those SMRs, absolutely should be included in that short-term category. All right, I know we're over, but this is a great discussion, so let's get through the last few here. Murray, if they're self-sufficient, that's fine, but they've got to bring their own power, their own cooling, no subsidies or tax credit. Okay, fair position. And they don't need to record everyone's private information. Again, I don't know how you police that. That's not the data centers that do that. But I do respect the point that we need to make sure we're not recording everyone's private information. I just don't know how we accomplish that here. That's more done under BIPA, which is something we should talk about. Since we're a few minutes over, let me make sure I talk about that. So when you are putting in new requirements, when it comes to economic development, the more you add requirements and regulations, you then suppress your economic development. So if you're going to approach this in a balanced way, you also need to give them something that will balance this out in their equation. And I've been told by numerous data center representative experts, et cetera, and people from tech companies even, that the biggest problem they have in Illinois is BIPA, the Biometric Information Privacy Act. It was reformed a little bit for businesses in Illinois not that long ago, but it needs to be reformed in this area where right now those tech companies, the data centers, are deathly afraid that they're going to be held liable for any biometric information that is stored on their servers by their users, by third parties. They're not doing it, but those third parties are doing it. But the way BIPA is written, it's so broad that data centers and these big tech companies are worried that they can also get sued, which is one of the major reasons why you're not seeing those major developers come into Illinois as much as they're going into other states. And so this is one way we can solve a lot of our problems. It's a common sense reform. You don't hold the data centers accountable for what somebody else stored on their servers. They can't police that. And so it's not common sense in the first place. But secondarily, if we want to have these regulations in place when data centers come in, you need to attract the major developers, the bigger players, if you will, the ones with the deeper pockets who can afford to do these things that we want them to do. Right now, they're not interested in Illinois because of BIPA. So if you can reform BIPA, we could then bring in those bigger players who would then agree to these investments that we're going to require in mitigation, in energy investments, in better technology so they're limiting their water usage, in even investments in these agreements to support our schools and our roads and our local communities. When you have developers come in who aren't those big companies with deep pockets, those are things that are more difficult for them to achieve, to be able to afford. But if we can bring in the bigger players, we can find this balance here. And so BIPA reform is one of the ways that you can do that. All right, I know we're over, but I want to get to the last couple people here. Leslie wants to know if Pritzker is personally invested in or profiting from data centers. I can tell you that his money's in a blind trust, and so that's what he'll say is, well, I don't really know. But I can also tell you that it's pretty well known that blind trust in some of his family and assets are in data centers, and including in data centers that may or may not be planned for the quantum campus on the South Shore of Chicago. So this is definitely something people are talking about, especially in Chicago, and probably something that more people should be looking into. Brett, big no on data centers. We don't need them. They use our resources that should be dedicated to civilians. Certainly it's a fair position to make. Brett is also worried about the surveillance state. We've talked about that. I do respect that position. All right, we're almost done. I respect we're over the time, so for those who needed to go, I respect that, but let's keep going. Ray, the companies that want these data centers need to tell us how many of them they actually need. Yeah, we talked about that. I agree. They should only be built in industrial areas, not on good farmland. Also a valid point. They shouldn't be built close to homes. We need to know how many we need. Don't want a bubble. And they got to provide their own power, their own water. All really, really good points. And then more trolls. So we'll move past that. All right. Let me move over to our last spot here and make sure we got to the last of our comments because we kept them in a second place. We talked about transparency. We talked about NDAs. We didn't talk about this. There's another bill that I'd recommend. Steve Stottleman, the senator from northwest of where I am here, Senate Bill 2181, is something we should be talking about, where it would require facilities, these data center facilities, to report their energy and their water usage. It's really hard to make plans for our energy needs, our water needs, when we don't even know what those needs actually are. And so doing this in a way that is done the right way, not overly burdensome, but it's not unreasonable to ask them to report to us once a year, or maybe even more frequently, but at least once a year, which I think is what this bill asks for, their energy and water usage. So I do recommend looking into Senate Bill 2181. We've talked about energy. We've talked about water. We've talked about delivering real property tax relief. We've talked about respecting neighbor communities. We've talked about BIPA. I think we've covered all the aspects of this. I'll jump over to the YouTube chat. If anyone has any final comments or thoughts. JFR, have any data centers been built underground? Would doing that be a way to preserve farmland? I don't know. That's actually a really good point. I don't have an answer. I will be Googling that the moment we're done because that's an interesting question. I know we've been talking about putting energy generation, above like car parks? Like, do we put solar panels above like parking lots and car parks? We do have to think about up and down, not just always out. So I don't know, JFR, but I'm going to Google it. Great question. With that, we're 10 minutes over. My producer would like to go home, and I got to save my voice because I've got like a zillion things I've got to do tomorrow on the campaign schedule. So I'll say thank you, everyone, for participating in this. This has been a great discussion on data centers. We're going to keep it going all week. So stay tuned to our social media. If you're not already connected to me on socials, make sure you find me. It's pretty easy to find me. It's Collin Corbett. I'm on Facebook. I'm on X. I'm just getting going on Insta. I know I should have done it forever ago, but I'm just getting going there. I'm also on LinkedIn. And you can connect with us here on YouTube, on the Illinois Independence YouTube channel. Please make sure you subscribe to that channel as we're putting out lots of really good content, so you'll be notified. And if you're not on our email list, we put out lots of really good things on our email list. So go to Collin4IL, COLLIN4IL. I thought maybe it might be on screen, but it's not. But yeah, go to our website. Make sure you sign up there. Thank you for being part of this. This is what our movement, I know, I hate the word. I'm working on finding a better word for that. But this is what this whole independent effort is about. It's more than just my run. It's more than just me. It's about, can we all sit around a table, whether physically or virtually, and actually come up with solutions to the problems we face? Can we actually talk to each other again? I had a meeting just before this with somebody who is so frustrated about our politics because, as he said, we can't talk to anybody anymore. There's no conversations that we have with each other. That's what we want to bring back as part of this. And if we can accomplish anything in my run, I want it to be that, because I truly believe the more that we talk, the more that we get reasonable people around the table, the more that we actually think through policies and issues, the more we're going to find common sense solutions put forward. Because if we just keep playing into this broken two-party system where we just scream at each other and want to beat each other, nothing is ever going to get solved. So let's work together. Let's actually solve the problems. And if that takes us an hour and 12 minutes instead of a quick one-sentence social media post, well, then so be it, because we're here to solve problems. Thank you for your time. We'll catch you next week on Live from the Lincoln Desk every Tuesday at 7 p.m.